The reading can be found on page 42 of your Pew Bible. A reading from Genesis chapter 50, beginning at verse 15. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, 'I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father.' Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him and said, 'We are here as your slaves.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones.' In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived for 110 years. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God."
Please pray with me a minute. Lord, may my words be your words. May we hear them. May you stir our hearts this morning. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So I've got to see if the technology is working. Let's try turning it on. Yay! There we go. So Simon last week introduced the theme of covenant and kingdom, and he referred to Mike Breen's book, which describes these themes, I thought rather accurately, as a DNA of the Bible. So intrinsic to it that they run through it, the two themes, like the helix of a DNA. So to him, it's not just an Old Testament part, the covenant, or a New Testament part, the kingdom. It's through the whole Bible. And we're going to look at that this morning. Later in the book, he comes up with another metaphor which I really quite liked, and that sort of linked into a little bit to what Simon was saying last week as well, about the lens, of looking through a lens. He says, looking through the joint lens like a pair of binoculars. You have covenant and kingdom as these two lenses. And when you think about it, we've got two eyes for a reason. With by vision, we get to see the perspective. We get to see a depth, that extra dimension, when we hold these two images, these two visions together. And that led me to think, well, this is sort of quite typical of the Bible, really. We're often asked to have these two, sometimes almost conflicting viewpoints and hold them together. Yes, the Bible loves a paradox. We have to hold the fact that Jesus was fully man and fully God. We have to hold the fact that God deals with our sin with judgment and grace. That God is one, but he's three. And it's not as if we can sort of take one idea and sort of balance it with the other idea and perhaps pull them into the middle, you know. No, God doesn't want us to compromise. So it's not surprising that we're going to look through the Bible with these two themes and see what comes out as we do that. So just to recap a little bit. Believe me, I'm not Burge. I won't be recapping the whole week. So here we... Okay. No slight men. I'll do the same at the 10:30 so you can have another go back at me. Don't worry. So we looked at covenant, very much a sort of an Old Testament theme, and we're introduced to that with this arrangement, really, that God makes with Abraham. Well, it's more than an arrangement, isn't it? When we think about it, it's a relationship. They enter into a relationship. So rather than perhaps use this old word covenant, we should perhaps try and use relationship. And when the Bible talks about relationship, there's the hint of the covenant. Sort of brings it to life. And there was 3 parts to that relationship that were very important, that were brought out last week. It's the fatherhood of God. It's our identity that God gives us, and a obedience to God that forms that relationship. So we spoke about Abraham last week, and this week we're going to look more at the kingdom side of it and introduce a very strong part of the kingdom that's relevant in Joseph. Joseph. Here we go, just so you know what we're talking about. Yeah, I'm sure you're all sighing there, aren't you? What can Gordon talk to us about Joseph we haven't heard before? Yes, don't worry, I've been in your pews. And of course, I do a lot of children's work, and Joseph is a great story, so I've covered this several times in several aspects. But the beauty of the Bible is that when we read it and when we reread it, even these passages that are familiar, something new always jumps out, doesn't it? Do you find that? I find that. So now we're looking at this passage. It's very well known, so I'm going to skip through some of it and really point out the points that I feel this covenant and kingdom lens, this pair of binoculars we're going to look at that with, brings out. And see if you can see the same. So as with covenant kingdom, we're looking for 3 aspects of kingdom. We're looking, believe it or not, for kingship. We're looking for power, and we're looking for authority. And my slides, I'm not keeping up with myself here. There we go. There. Just in case you didn't know what they were. They're there. So who was Joseph? Now we're talking about relationships, so I think we should get something right. Who likes family trees? Anybody here research their family tree? Yes, 1 or 2? Interesting stuff. Well, it's quite crucial, I think, to the understanding the story, especially the first reading we heard this morning. And the Bible loves family trees. And chapter 36 is full of Esau's descendants, and they're actually given a name, these descendants. It's called a Toledoth. I think I'll pronounce that right. But so there's whole sections of the Bible dedicated to genealogy. So what do we know about Joseph? Yeah, see if I can get this right. Oh, he's right at the top. Father, of course, Jacob, who God calls Israel. And Jacob had 2 wives, sisters, and there's a big story just in that, isn't there? That's Rachel and Leah. So Leah, his first wife, if you like, gives him 6 sons. The eldest, which is Reuben, and then Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Love of his life, Rachel gives him 2. Joseph, and then tragically dies in the birth of Benjamin, who is the youngest son. It doesn't stop there, though. Don't forget, we're going back in time. This isn't today's Church of England arrangements. We have the maids. So we have 2 maids. We have Rachel's maid, Bilhah, and she produces Dan and Naphtali. And we have Leah's maid producing Leah's maid Zalpath producing Gad and Asher. 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. This is where they come from. I'll just hold that up because it's quite relevant to the first part of the story. So we're introduced to Joseph in Genesis 37 as a 17-year-old shepherd. What's the first thing we know that he does? Well, he's out there being a shepherd. He's a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpath. So he, a son of a wife, is helping the sons of the maids. Now there may be, if you can think about that story, that position that he's in, there may be some resentment to that. There may be that there was something going wrong and he resented that they were doing something wrong to his father. But what we hear is he gives a bad report of these guys. Not a good start for our hero, is it? And this bad report is accepted by his father. Because we read then that he is a favourite. a favourite. Now, this is where Joseph and I have a little bit of in common, really. You know, it's a funny position to be in, to be a favourite. It's not something he chose to be, his father's favourite. And I was my sort of mum's pet, you know. And I can sort of empathise with him, the resentment that you get from being a favourite. On the one hand, you get all the sort of perks, if you like, of extra love and affection and attention. But on the other hand, you get the resentment from your siblings. And I wonder if any of you here were mum's favourite or dad's favourite. Or were you the other one who felt second best because there was a favourite? Did you resent your parents for that? Or did you resent your siblings? This is strong stuff. Strong stuff. And to make things worse, as parents who have got favourites always do, the coat. Joseph's coat of many colours, or his technicolored dream coat. Now, I think Simon was being very brave giving me this, because he must be thought, now, is he going to morph into that song, you know? Oh, I closed my eyes, drew back the curtains. This is where you go, ah. Oh, he did, very good. You want to do that again? Excellent. Yes, well, the strange thing is, there's no mention of a technicoloured coat in the Bible that I could find. What it says, it's a long coat with sleeves, long sleeves. So what's so important about a coat with sleeves? Well, it marks Joseph out now. He's got a coat that says that he's the boss. He's in charge. Just like today we roll up our sleeves to do some work. In those days, you had sleeves because you didn't work. That was for somebody else. You had sleeves. You had a coat with sleeves. Straight away, somebody recognised you as the boss, the supervisor, the one in charge. So he's given authority over these brothers, perhaps, that, they won't be happy about that. So what does he do? Now he makes things worse for himself, doesn't he? He talks about a dream where his brothers are all sheaves of wheat and they're bending down towards him, bowing down. He's the boss man. And not content with that indignation and the upset that causes, he then goes to add his mother and father to the mix. And we end up with something like that. This is his vision of his 11 brothers bowing down as sons. And he gives his mothers, maybe, and father a little bit of elevation. They're the sun and moon. Not a very wise thing to do, is it? Stirring up this jealousy. You can really start to feel the tension in this family, you know? So what happens? His father gives him a mild rebuke. You shouldn't have done that, he says. That must really gone down well with the other kids, mustn't it? You know. So we got a little bit of telling off. We can see that this is a foretaste, this is the future. But at that present time, even his father is saying, you really expect us to bow to you? Don't be ridiculous. Don't get above yourself. But when you think it can't get worse, it does. What's the next thing we see Joseph doing? Well, actually his father gives him a job. Oh, go out and check on the boys, will you? Remember what happened last time? So it's no surprise that when his brothers see Joseph appearing over the hillside, they're not enamoured, are they? They're thinking, the last time he came to check on the brothers, he went back and told Dad all about it. What makes things worse, of course, if you look at the detail of the story, he's sent to Shechem, where he finds they've moved on. They're not there. They're in Dothan. So were they in the wrong place? Did they have a little bit of guilt mixed in? Were they up to something? I don't know. Anyway, you can just imagine perhaps Joseph going, you wait till I tell Dad. But he doesn't get the chance, does he? Now, the one thing that struck me about this particular story, looking at relationships, at this point, it's Reuben. And who is Reuben? The firstborn, the eldest. It's Reuben who comes to his defense. It's Reuben that stops him actually killing him. Reuben speaks for Joseph, defends him. And Reuben's got the most to lose, this usurper. He's looking at his position in the hierarchy, you know. He wants to be the one at the top of the chain. Or does he? That's what his dreams are saying. So Reuben is the most threatened, but he has the heart to actually defend his younger brother. Moving on, we find Joseph in the employment of Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Verse 39. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. So not only has Joseph got the favour of his earthly father, but he's got the favour of his heavenly Father too. He can do no wrong. Further to that we have, now Joseph was handsome and good looking. Handsome and good looking. I think that's trying to tell us that not only was his face sort of charming, but his physique was good as well. I think the expression is now he was hot, whatever that means. Yes. It's a good thing the Bible's written then, not now, isn't it? So he had it made. So did this reinforce this feeling, you know, the past slide where he's at the centre of things? 17 years old he was, you know, aren't all 17-year-olds think that at the centre of things? Can do no wrong. He's found so much favour. Well, the next little chapter tells us that he has grown. Not only does he say to dear Potiphar's wife, when he is no doubt sorely tempted, no, this would be wrong. It would be betraying Potiphar, who's shown so much trust in me. He says, and I quote verse 39, be a sin against God. Another thing on those little things worth noting when you reread these things, Potiphar's wife. The Bible has an interesting technique that when it shows disdain of somebody, when it doesn't want to honour them, you don't get the credits at the end. You don't get your name. Potiphar's wife is always just Potiphar's wife. So what happens now? This is an accusation quite grave in those days. Stoning, or what should we have? There's a choice. Oh, go on, couldn't you? How should we kill this man? Well, he doesn't get killed, does he? No, and I think the root of that must be Potiphar himself. He's a powerful man. I don't think he believed his wife. I almost am led to believe that perhaps this sort of thing had happened before, you know. She's perhaps a little bit of a wayward sort. But he had to do something. He'd got to save face. So poor Joseph trades from being a slave to a prisoner. And he finds himself in the prison. The head jailer, though, puts him in charge of all their prisoners. So we're starting to see a bit of a pattern here. Now, see if I can get the technology to work. So we have his father trusts him to oversee and report on his brothers, even though he's not the eldest brother, which is the normal position of trust. We've got Potiphar, puts him in charge of his household, even though he's just a slave. Just a slave. We have the chief jailer committing him to look after all the prisoners, even though he was just another slave. And now we're going to move on to Pharaoh himself, putting Joseph in charge of all his people, even though he was a foreigner. Amazing. This man is unstoppable. He rises to the top. So we're going to come now to the climax of the story. Well, this is where Pharaoh steps in. What happens next? I'm going to skip forward a little bit here. Pharaoh now has this dream. He needs help. Can our man rise to the challenge? Can he do this? Well, someone thinks he can. So he's given a bit of a clean, do you notice he gets a bit of a shave and a clean up before he gets to go in front of the Pharaoh? I think that's perhaps to return him to, what was it? This handsome and good looking person that he once was. Pharaoh's dream. Can Joseph interpret Pharaoh's dream? All the wise men of Pharaoh, this is the most powerful man on the planet, but all these wise men, they must be pretty wise to be his men. They can't do it. We know that Joseph has revealed the true meaning of the dreams of the Pharaoh's cup-bearer. Good news for him. He'd done the same for the baker. Not such good news for him, though. So would this revelation of this dream be good news for the Pharaoh or bad? Can Joseph do it? So he's brought now. This is the moment. This is the trials and tribulations of his life that have led him to this moment where he's in front of the most important and powerful man in the world. Life and death, his life hangs in the balance of this one answer. He's been put up as the person who can do this. You know, there's only one thing that can save him now, and that's for him to do this job. And what does he say? Not I. Not I. You must have been able to hear the pin drop, if they had pins in ancient Egypt. This is his chance. This is his chance to show how clever he is at interpreting dreams. This is his chance for freedom. This is his chance for power. But he says, not I. It's because Joseph now is in a relationship with God, a covenant relationship, where he knows his identity with God. He places his trust in God because he knows God has put trust into him. He is obedient to his God and is going to reveal the kingship of his God. Not I, he says. God will give Pharaoh a favourable answer. Whew, it's a close one, wasn't it? Do you remember how things looked like early on? We had Joseph at the centre of things. So perhaps this is where we've moved to now. We have Joseph still at the centre of our story, still at the centre of what we're looking at. But now God is with him. It's this covenant, this relationship that's come to join them together. And Joseph only knows he's only there in this opportunity because God is with him. It's taken him 13 years of slavery and imprisonment from a 17-year-old to grow in this faith with God. He's had a charmed life. He's risen to the top several times. But there's always been a price, a personal price to him. The jealousy of his brothers, the lust of Potiphar's wife, the neglect of the cupbearer who left him for 2 years to rot in jail because he just forgot. But this has made him a faithful servant. He's submitted to God. And even Pharaoh can see this. Like the jailer and Potiphar and his father before him, he could see God working through Joseph. And it says in 41 here, can we find anyone else like this? One in whom is the Spirit of God. So from this point on, things were very different for Joseph. Things were never going to be the same. He had power. He had responsibility. We get a glimpse now of God's kingdom on earth as Joseph prepares with the good years to save resources to feed through the famine, and through that process saves many, many lives. But there's a time coming, a time of reckoning, where we see how he's going to use this power, because the famine spreads and it grips the land where his brothers are and his father. And they come to Egypt for help, and who do they come to see? Oh, what a gift. What a chance for revenge. Justice. But this is what makes the story of Joseph so significant. Because this is where it reveals God's kingdom on earth. How does Joseph wield this power that he knows he has been given, not from the king Pharaoh, from the king God? What is he going to do with this power? He's going to show mercy. He forgives his brothers, not once but twice. More than that, he welcomes them, and he provides for them and the generations that follow. the part of the story where he meets his blood brother Benjamin, remember? They are the only two from the one mother, is brought to tears. It's such a poignant story. There's, to me, reading this and other parts, there's almost an overture here, an echo of the prodigal son. See if you can pick that out sometimes when you read it. So who doesn't like a happy ending? It's all ended quite happily. It's rather good for our Joseph. And you can see quite clearly, now, hello, what have I done? The DNA running through this kingdom. And what about the covenant? Yes, there's a covenant. If I just pick up on verse 46 here. These are the words that God spoke to Jacob to reassure him. Go down to Egypt, for I will make you a nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will bring you up again. And Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes. That's a beautiful last little bit, isn't it? Doesn't that show that God is in relationship with Jacob, and he knows what this dying man in his last breath would want, his favourite son with him, and he promises him that. Beautiful stuff. So in this story of Joseph, we've seen how Pharaoh rules his kingdom through this man. And I believe it's a model for us to show how God wants to rule his kingdom through us. His kingdom here on earth. But that's a lot of power that God's willing to give, isn't it? So it's hardly surprising that he puts Joseph and some of us sometimes through quite a lot to see that we're up to receiving that power. Because we need to be in a true covenant relationship. We need to know our identity with God. To be given that authority, to be given that power, to bring that kingdom here on earth. You see, Joseph was never a king. He never even sought to be a king. He just wanted to serve God and point the way to him. And that brings me, in conclusion, to Paul's letter to the Philippians. There's a resonance of it here. Though he was in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Let us pray that we have the right covenant relationship with God, that we can be given that power to enable God's kingdom to grow.